I have been working on a game for the last year, so for the next few videos I'm going to try out a new style of devlog mixed with focused explanations of the methods behind what I'm doing. Let me know in the comments if you like this better or worse than just raw coding videos. I'm going to use these videos as a jumping off point for more detailed explanations when needed to keep things interesting. Every week is different, but there are three main focuses that come up a lot: level design, code, and graphics. This week was mainly a mishmash between level design and coding. Let's start with the level design because it frequently dictates what needs to be coded. To give a quick overview of this game world so far, the plan is there to be 5 different worlds. I finished a basic first one that was in a forest setting, so I wanted to do something I've never seen before for the second. This one was going to be based in a canyon, but I wanted some sort of caves also. I ended up with a design where the world is split into 3 sections. There's a main path that is the most challenging and full of pits, which if you fall through, bring you to the caves. After you complete the caves, you loop back around through levels on the ridge of the canyon to the beginning. To ease the annoyance of going all the way around, there are ladders that you can unlock in the canyon levels that let you go from the caves up to those levels. I think this is cool because it lets you attempt the hardest levels first, but if you get overwhelmed and fall into one of the pits, you get the introduction to the mechanics, then hopefully be nice enough at them to not get destroyed next time. Level design is where I have the least experience, so I'm basically winging it, but after playing Dark Souls I've realized that giving the player options and not telling them about them can make the world feel much bigger and more complex than it actually is. Even just including a map immediately scopes the game world and ends any imagination about what could happen next. Because I'm making a tiny game, I'm trying to leverage this as much as possible and create an interesting set of options for the player so people can make their own strategies and runs. I had the idea to put the mini-boss of this world on the first level of the canyon to screw with people, but after watching my brother play we realized that if you fall into one of the holes you can skip it if you have the ladders activated already. I had originally planned for the mini-boss to be on level 6, so I just added a trigger that would respawn the boss if he wasn't killed. This level has no pits, so you're forced to defeat him this time around. I thought that was the end of it, but then I had my sister play and she would fall into the pits every time. I realized that if you didn't have the ladders activated, you needed to go all the way around, which isn't very fun. My solve was to allow the player to go backwards through the cave levels if they want, and use a ladder to get up to the first canyon level. This forces the player to make the call between which way they want to go. It also changes depending on if you're on a second run or not, which adds replayability. That was it for the design. Now it's time to code it. The easiest thing to do is to make the mini-boss respawn itself, so I did that first. All that had to happen was to add another point to the save file noting if the boss had been defeated. If not, when the player got to level 6, there is now an invisible trigger which spawns the boss when touched. Here we say, when something has collided with me, see if it has a player component. If it does, send an event to spawn the boss and close the door, then delete me. If you notice, this is making use of the physics engine that I showed how to make a couple months ago. If you want to check that out, it's in the top corner right now. So now if we run through the game and get to level 6 without killing the boss, after beating the level, if we try and exit, we get attacked from above. Alright, well that wasn't so hard, but allowing the player to go backwards through the levels meant that it was time to overhaul the level system. This system was the source of many issues that would break the game, so I was excited to replace it. Before, it worked by storing a current level and swapping that out when a new one was loaded. This meant that while the levels were being swapped out, if anything reset a level or tried to load another one, it would crash because it could only track 2 at a time. For the new design, I split the system into 2. One manages the layout and the other manages the actual loading of levels. This made the code much more readable because now the functionality is split up, so I don't have to look through hundreds of lines of code to find the part that tells it to spawn the levels versus the actual spawning of the levels. Now instead of levels being connected to one another by file name and their doors, there is a world layout that keeps a stack of previous levels and a current level layout that holds its connections. This acts like a tree, and loading the previous levels into a stack as opposed to saving the world as a doubly linked tree means that I can use my simple serializer to save the root level layout and save the whole world in one file. Then when I want to load a level that isn't a connection, it just needs to search the tree for the level and push the path to the previous levels onto the stack. Another feature that this allows for free is the ability to load all the connections of a level and keep the previous level loaded as well. This stops the player from being able to see into the void until they get through one of the doors, which makes the world feel much more connected. Eventually it would be cool to just walk through the door, but the colliders make that hard, so for now this works well enough. To put icing on the cake, I decided to finally fix up the horrendous transition animations, if you could even call them that. The player, camera, and level were all free-floating transforms, not parented to one another. I tried to line up their speeds and timings, but this would always end up doing this weird overshoot then slide back maneuver. The main reason for why these didn't line up was because they all had to move different distances, so their speed would be out of sync. I was having trouble storing the starting positions, and I didn't want member variables in the systems, or variables in the components for that matter, because it's a little messy. After playing around with some different solutions, I realized that it had been staring me in the face the whole time. Lambdas come in with the save again, as you can pass variables to them by value, and I already have made a way to queue these up, so I just threw them into my thread pool. This is really unsafe, but I know that these values don't get touched until after the transition, so it's fine. In a future video I'll cover the proper way to do this with coroutines, but I haven't implemented those yet, so this will have to do. So let's look at the results. Here we're in the first cave level, and when we go through the door, look at that, buttery smooth. A huge improvement over the initial transitions. I think this was well worth the effort. If there's a little more light in the scene, we can really see the other level. Look at how much better that looks. And if we were fighting the boss on the first level and fall into one of the pits, we can now choose to go backwards to the ladder in the first cave to try again, or on your second playthrough you can fight the boss on level 6 or skip it if you get the right items. I'm going to have to think of some reward that you get to incentivize not skipping it entirely, but we'll see. It could be that you get some item that helps you with the final boss of the world or something like that. That's pretty much all for this week. In the next log I think I'm going to be done with the canyon so I can move on to the next world. I'm excited to log that one from beginning to end instead of just the last 5% like with these canyons. Let me know what ratio you want for these videos in the comments. They're definitely much easier than the full coding videos because I can just talk about stuff that I have done instead of making a new thing. But they're less useful in my opinion. Thanks for watching, I hope to see you next time.